They said no man could touch her. Then the human walked into the ring. Arena of Pride. The twin suns of Nexus Prime cast crimson shadows across the crystal dome, where the greatest warriors in the galaxy came to test their mettle. Inside the translucent arena, the air hummed with anticipation as thousands of beings from dozens of worlds filled the floating observation decks. Today marked another trial combat, another chance to witness the legendary Commander Zevra Kane defend her unbroken record. Zevra stood motionless in the preparation chamber, her silver-blue skin catching the arena's ethereal light. The Valerian warrior had earned her reputation through 15 years of flawless victories, her combat prowess becoming the stuff of legend across 3-star systems. Her muscular frame moved with predatory grace as she adjusted her ceremonial armor, each piece crafted from rare metals found only in the depths of her homeworld's volcanic forges. "Another challenger seeks the honor of facing you, Commander," announced her aide, Talon, his voice carrying the formal reverence required when addressing Nexus Prime's champion, though this one is unusual. Zevra's violet eyes narrowed with interest. Few beings dared enter the crystal dome anymore, knowing they faced not just defeat, but potential humiliation before the galaxy's elite. Unusual how? A human. From the outer colonies, he registered under the name Marcus Vale. A laugh escaped Zevra's lips, rich and dismissive. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their emotional volatility and physical limitations. They excelled at engineering and diplomacy. But combat? The very notion seemed absurd. What brings a human to my arena? Does he seek a quick death, or merely wishes to entertain the crowds with his inevitable failure? The registration indicates he's an engineer from the mining station orbiting Kepler 442b. Beyond that, his motives remain unclear. Zevra strode toward the arena entrance, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. "Then let us not keep the audience waiting. I'm curious to see what delusion of grandeur drives this human to face me." The arena erupted in cheers as she emerged into the crystalline combat space. The dome's walls shifted to transparency, offering spectators an unobstructed view of the circular platform suspended over a field of energy that would cushion any warrior unfortunate enough to fall. Zevra raised her hand, acknowledging the crowd's adoration with practiced confidence. Across the platform, a figure emerged from the opposing entrance. Marcus Vale appeared unremarkable by any combat standard. Average height for a human, lean, build, wearing simple practice gear rather than the elaborate armor typical of arena challengers. His brown hair was unkempt, his green eyes calm as they surveyed the space around him. He moved with quiet deliberation, seemingly unaffected by the crowd's murmurs of disbelief. "Citizens of Nexus Prime," the arena's announcer declared, his voice amplified throughout the dome. "Witness today's trial combat between our undefeated champion, Commander Zevra Kane of Valeria, and challenger Marcus Vale of the Human Colonial Engineering Corps." Zevra studied her opponent as they approached the center circle. No fear registered in his expression, which struck her as either impressive bravery or dangerous foolishness. Most challengers, regardless of species, showed some sign of nervousness when facing her reputation. "Human," she called out, her voice carrying easily across the platform. "I'll grant you one opportunity to withdraw with your dignity intact. Face me, and I promise only that your defeat will be swift." Marcus met her gaze steadily, offering a slight nod that might have been respect or acknowledgement. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear. "I appreciate the offer, Commander, but I didn't come here to withdraw." The combat gong resonated through the crystal dome, its deep tone signaling the beginning of what every spectator expected to be the shortest match in arena history. First, Touch Zevra launched herself forward with the fluid precision that had made her legendary, her enhanced Valerian physiology propelling her across the platform in a blur of silver and violet. Her opening strike came from above, a devastating downward arc designed to end the match within seconds. It was a signature move that had broken the will of countless opponents before they could even mount a defense. Marcus didn't meet her attack head-on, as expected. Instead, he shifted his weight in a way that seemed almost casual, his body flowing to one side like water around a stone. Zevra's strike cleaved through empty air, her momentum carrying her past where he had been standing. She landed gracefully, spinning to face him, but found herself momentarily off balance, not physically, but mentally. No opponent had ever made avoiding her opening assault look so effortless. The crowd's cheers faltered into confused murmurs. This wasn't how trial combats began. Interesting, Zevra said, circling him slowly. You move like you've studied Valerian combat forms. I've studied many things, Marcus replied, his stance relaxed but ready, including you, Commander. She attacked again, this time with a series of rapid strikes designed to overwhelm through sheer speed and precision. Each blow should have connected, should have driven him back or forced him into a defensive posture that would allow her to dominate the match's rhythm. Instead, Marcus seemed to anticipate each attack before she fully committed to it, his movements minimal but perfectly timed. He wasn't just avoiding her strikes, he was reading her intentions, seeing patterns in her technique that even she wasn't fully conscious of. The realization sent an unfamiliar chill through her spine. You're not trying to win, she observed, pausing her assault. What exactly are you doing? Learning, he said simply. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard, more than any combat technique could have. Warriors came to the Crystal Dome for glory, for the chance to defeat her and claim fame across the galaxy. They didn't come to learn. Zevra pressed her attack with renewed intensity, drawing upon combat techniques she hadn't needed in years. Her movements became a symphony of controlled violence, each strike flowing into the next with mechanical precision. Yet Marcus continued to evade, his breathing steady, his focus absolute. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch across eternity, everything changed. As Zevra committed to a particularly complex combination attack, Marcus didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, inside her guard, his hand moving with deliberate gentleness to redirect her strike, while his other hand came to rest against her chest. Not with force, but with the kind of controlled contact that spoke of absolute mastery. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Zevra found herself displaced, her balance broken not by power, but by perfect timing and understanding of momentum. She stumbled backward, her feet seeking purchase on the crystal platform as the impossible happened. She had been touched, controlled, moved by an opponent. The arena fell into absolute silence. Zevra stared at Marcus, her violet eyes wide with shock. In 15 years of combat, no challenger had ever managed to lay a hand on her in offense. Defensive contact was inevitable in close combat, but what Marcus had just done transcended defense. He had read her attack so completely that he had turned her own technique into his opportunity. How? The word escaped her lips before she could stop it, vulnerability bleeding through her legendary composure. Marcus straightened, his expression gentle but serious. Because I wasn't trying to beat you, Commander. I was trying to understand you. The distinction hit her like a physical blow. Every opponent she had ever faced had sought to prove themselves superior, to take her title, to claim her position. They had all seen her as an obstacle to overcome, but Marcus had approached their encounter as a conversation, treating her legendary skill not as something to defeat, but as something to comprehend. For the first time in her adult life, Zevra felt truly seen, not as a champion, not as a symbol, but as a warrior whose techniques told a story he had taken the time to read. The feeling terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Match concluded," she announced, her voice carrying across the stunned arena. "Victory to understanding." As the crowd began to disperse in confused whispers, Zevra found herself unable to look away from the quiet human who had just changed. Everything she thought she knew about combat, about challenge, and about herself. Understanding and connection. 3 days passed before Zevra could bring herself to seek him out. She told herself it was professional curiosity, a warrior's need to understand the technique that had caught her off guard. But as she stood outside Marcus's temporary quarters in the station's visitor section, she knew the truth ran deeper than mere tactical interest. Her knock was answered immediately, as if he had been expecting her. "Commander," Marcus said, stepping aside to let her enter. His quarters were spartanly furnished, but organized with the precision she would expect from an engineer. Technical manuals shared space with what appeared to be philosophical texts from various worlds. "Your technique," she began without preamble, then found herself at a loss for words. How did one ask to be taught vulnerability? "Wasn't a technique," Marcus said gently, settling into a chair and gesturing for her to take the other. "It was observation. You telegraph your intentions about 3 seconds before you commit to them. Most opponents probably never notice because they're too focused on defending or counter-attacking." Zevra remained standing, pacing his small quarters like a caged predator. "Impossible. I've trained since childhood to eliminate such tells." "You have. But you've also developed patterns designed to intimidate. The slight shift of your shoulders before a power strike, the way your breathing changes when you're about to accelerate. They're not weaknesses, they're signatures of your style." The accuracy of his observations unsettled her. "You studied recordings of my matches." "Some, but mostly I watched you in those moments before the match began. How you moved, how you held yourself, how you responded to the crowd." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Combat isn't just about technique, Commander. It's about understanding who your opponent is, beneath their fighting style." "And what did you conclude about who I am?" The question surprised them both. Zevra hadn't intended to ask something so personal, so revealing. Marcus considered his answer carefully. "I saw someone who's been alone at the top for so long that she's forgotten combat can be a conversation instead of a conquest." The words hit harder than any physical strike. Zevra stopped pacing, her back to him, as she processed the implications. "You think I'm lonely. I think you're exceptional, and exceptional people often find themselves isolated by their very excellence." Something in his tone made her turn to face him. There was no pity in his expression, no condescension, only understanding tinged with something that might have been recognition. "Are you speaking from experience, engineer?" "In my field, yes. When you see patterns others miss, when you solve problems others can't even identify, people start to see you as something other than human." He paused. "I imagine being undefeated carries a similar burden." For the first time in years, Zevra felt truly heard. She moved to the window overlooking the station's central hub, watching beings from dozens of species go about their daily lives. "Show me," she said quietly. "Show you what? How to see what you see. How to—" She struggled with the words. "How to fight like that." Marcus joined her at the window. "It's not about fighting differently. It's about understanding differently. Would you like to try?" That night, they met in an unused cargo bay Marcus had requisitioned. The space was dimly lit, private, removed from the arena's spectacle and politics. Zevra arrived in simple training clothes, feeling oddly vulnerable without her ceremonial armor. "First lesson," Marcus said, taking a stance opposite her. "Don't try to win. Don't try to dominate. Just try to listen to what I'm telling you through my movement." "That makes no sense," Zevra protested. "Combat is about victory. Combat is about Communication. Victory is just one possible outcome of that communication. They began slowly, Marcus moving through basic forms while Zevra observed. He was right. Once she stopped analyzing his technique for weaknesses and started simply watching, she began to see the story his movements told. His balance spoke of patience, his breathing of calm focus, his positioning of someone who preferred to redirect rather than absorb impact. "Your turn," he said after several minutes. As Zevra moved through her own forms, she became acutely aware of Marcus's gaze, not judging, not critiquing, but simply receiving whatever message her movement carried. The attention felt intimate in a way that surprised her. "You carry a lot of anger," he observed gently. Zevra stopped mid-form. "What?" "In your technique. There's precision, yes, and incredible skill. But underneath it all, there's anger. Old. Anger, carefully controlled but never resolved." The accuracy of his observation left her breathless. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could see the green flecks in his eyes. "The question is whether you're ready to let it go." Standing there in the dim cargo bay, separated from him by mere inches, Zevra felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she had built around her heart, the armor she wore even when unclothed, began to show their first cracks. "I don't know." "How?" she whispered. "Then let me show you," Marcus said, extending his hand toward her with infinite patience and care. Forbidden feelings, the weeks that followed transformed both of their lives in ways neither had anticipated. Their midnight sessions in the cargo bay evolved from combat training into something far more profound, a careful excavation of the walls they had each built around their hearts. Marcus taught Zevra to feel the rhythm beneath the violence, to find a conversation hidden within conflict. Under his gentle guidance, she began to release the anger that had driven her for so many years, the fury at being judged for her strength, at being feared for her excellence, at being isolated by her very nature. In return, Zevra showed Marcus the beauty of controlled power, the art of moving with absolute certainty and grace. She helped him understand that strength wasn't something to apologize for, that mastery could be both fierce and gentle. "Your breathing has changed," Marcus observed during one of their sessions, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders as they practiced close-quarters forms. The touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Zevra's voice was softer than usual, her guard lower than she had ever allowed it to be with another being. Deeper, calmer. "The anger is leaving you." She turned in his arms, finding herself face to face with him in the dim light. "What's replacing it?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus's hands moved from her shoulders to frame her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "I think you know." When their lips met, it was with the same careful attention to understanding that had characterized everything between them. The kiss was exploratory, questioning, a new form of communication that required no translation. Zevra felt herself surrender to something she had never allowed before, complete trust in another being's intentions. They spent that night learning each other's bodies with the same patience and curiosity they had brought to combat. Marcus marveled at the strength in her silver-blue skin, the way her muscles moved beneath his touch, like poetry written in flesh. Zevra discovered that gentleness could be its own form of power, that vulnerability shared became strength multiplied. But their growing intimacy could not exist in isolation from the world around them. "Commander Caney," Talon's voice carried disapproval as he briefed her on the following day's schedule, "there are concerns being raised about your recent activities." Zevra didn't look up from the training reports she was reviewing. "Specify these concerns." "Your association with the human. Members of the Valerian Council have noted your frequent absences, the private meetings, Some question whether such connections compromise your position as our champion. The words hit like physical blows. Zevra had known this moment would come, but she hadn't been prepared for how much it would hurt. My personal relationships are not subject to council oversight. With respect, Commander, when those relationships involve beings from species the council considers inferior, they become matters of public concern. Zevra's violet eyes flashed with the old anger, but underneath it, Marcus's voice whispered, understanding, not conquest. Communication, not domination. Schedule a private meeting with Councillor Vex, she said finally. Tonight. The meeting took place in the council chambers, a crystalline hall that reflected light in ways designed to intimidate. Councillor Vex, ancient even by Valyrian standards, regarded Zevra with disapproval that radiated from his silver-white form. You have brought shame upon our people, he began without preamble. The great Commander Zevra reduced to consorting with humans. The galaxy watches, Commander, and they see weakness. They see evolution, Zevra replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. They see a warrior learning that true strength comes from connection, not isolation. Sentimental nonsense. You were bred for combat, designed for dominance. These feelings, they diminish what you represent. What I represent, Zevra said, stepping forward, is the possibility that we can be more than our programming. That Valyrians can grow beyond the limitations others place on us. Vex's expression hardened. You will end this association immediately, or face removal from your position. The choice is yours, Commander. That night, Zevra found Marcus waiting, in their usual meeting place. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. They've forbidden it, he said simply. Yes. She moved into his arms, seeking the comfort she had never needed before. Vex gave me an ultimatum. End our relationship or lose everything I've worked for. Marcus held her close, his hand stroking her hair. What will you do? I don't know. The admission cost her, but with Marcus, honesty had become a habit. Everything I am, everything I've built, it's all tied to being their champion. Without that, you'd still be you, Marcus said gently. The person who chose understanding over conquest, who learned to release her anger, who taught me that strength and gentleness aren't opposites. Zevra pulled back to look at him, searching his face. You'd give up your career, your life here, for what we have. I'd give up everything for you, he said without hesitation, but I won't ask you to. Make the same sacrifice. This decision has to be yours. As they held each other in the darkness, both knowing that dawn would bring choices that would change everything, Zevra realized that Marcus had taught her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest victory came from having something worth losing, true strength. The great assembly hall of Nexus Prime had never hosted anything quite like what Zevra was about to attempt. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the floating observation platforms, drawn by rumors that the legendary commander would make some sort of unprecedented announcement. Zevra stood at the center of the hall's speaking platform, wearing not her ceremonial armor, but simple robes that spoke of choice rather than obligation. Marcus waited in the audience, his presence a source of strength she drew upon as she faced the assembled dignitaries. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. I stand before you today, not as your undefeated champion, but as a warrior who has learned the difference between winning and understanding. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Councillor Vex sat rigid in the Valyrian delegation, his disapproval radiating across the hall. For 15 years, I believed that strength meant standing alone, that victory required the defeat of others. I was wrong. Zevra's gaze found Marcus, in the crowd, drawing courage from his steady presence. True strength lies not in our ability to dominate, but in our willingness to connect. Not in our power to destroy, but in our capacity to understand. She gestured toward Marcus, who rose, and walked calmly to join her on the platform, despite the shocked whispers that followed his movement. This human showed me something I had never seen before, that combat could be communication, that opponents could become partners, that the greatest victories come not from conquering others, but from growing beyond our own limitations. Counselor, Vex stood, his voice cutting through the hall. Commander Caney speaks of weakness disguised as wisdom. The Valyrian people do not accept this corruption of our values. Then perhaps, Zevra said calmly, it's time for new values. She reached for Marcus's hand, their fingers intertwining, as she made her choice public and irreversible. I formally renounce my position as champion of the Crystal Dome, but I do not renounce my commitment to showing this galaxy that we can be more than the sum of our prejudices. The hall erupted in chaos. Some species representatives shouted approval, others condemnation. But through it all, Zevra felt only peace. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. In the months that followed, Zevra and Marcus established the Institute for Interspecies Understanding on a neutral world at the galaxy's edge. Their combat philosophy, that true strength came from connection rather than dominance, attracted students from every corner of known space. The Valyrian Council initially condemned their efforts, but as reports filtered back of conflicts resolved. Through understanding rather than violence, of warriors learning to fight with their minds as well as their bodies, even the most conservative voices began to acknowledge the wisdom in their approach. Any regrets? Marcus asked one evening as they watched their students practice in the Institute's training grounds. Beings from a dozen different species moved together in harmony, learning not just combat techniques, but the deeper art of seeing opponents. As partners in a cosmic dance, Zevra leaned into his embrace, watching as a young Valyrian successfully demonstrated the patience-based techniques Marcus had taught her so long ago. Only that it took me so long to understand what you saw from the beginning, which was that the strongest warriors aren't those who never fall, she said, turning in his arms to face him. They're the ones who fall and choose to rise together. Their kiss was witnessed by dozens of students, each representing a different world, a different way of thinking, a different approach to strength. And in that moment, Zevra knew they had accomplished something more valuable than any championship. They had proven that love wasn't weakness. It was the foundation upon which true power was built. The undefeated champion had finally found her greatest victory, not in standing alone atop a pedestal of conquest, but in standing beside the one, being in the galaxy, who had seen past her armor to the woman beneath. Together, they were rewriting the very definition of what it meant to be strong. As the twin suns set over their new world, casting the same crimson light that had once illuminated the Crystal Dome, Zevra and Marcus began planning the next day's lessons. There were always more students to teach, more minds to open, more hearts to help heal. After all, the universe was vast, and there was so much understanding yet to share.